to have you all here with us today. And I don't want to take up too much time and pass this over so that we can get the most out of our time with our honored guests with us this evening. But I just want to remind us, this is going to be an interactive session. We will be in breakout rooms. So it would be great to have faces visible and audio muted when not speaking. We are recording this part of the session, but we will not record the individual discussion groups. And just want to remind everyone, we gave in our communication, forwarded over some norms that our students created in our 7-8 team, led by Mr. Joseph Liebson, who is going to be our facilitator this evening. And so we asked that all of our participants come today and honor those norms that our 7th and 8th grade students impressively crafted together and went through a process to develop what they felt was needed in their community as students engage with one another. And so number 1 was to welcome and accept everyone in all ways they are diverse. 2 was to deal with issues directly, not through gossip. 3 was to criticize ideas and not people. 4 was to speak kindly, even in times of disagreement. And 5, which I think was cut off in the last email, and so I apologize, I did that as a little hook to get everyone here tonight, is to be mindful of how your actions will be viewed by younger students. And so I thought I was really impressed with that and thought that tonight we would honor those and model those for our incredible students. So Mr. Liebson, I pass this over to you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Hakeem. My name is Joe Liebson. I am a Spanish teacher here at Birmingham Covington School. I also am a member of our school's diversity committee, which is a group of staff members, parents, and students who come together weekly. We meet on Tuesday mornings. Later on, we'll give you some info about how you can hook into that if that's something that anyone's interested in being a part of. But we work on trying to make our school a more inclusive and welcoming place for everyone. And we have held over the last couple of years a series of panel discussions on a number of issues impacting students and teachers and everyone in our community. And so this is kind of continuing in that vein of doing these types of events for our community. And so I particularly want to thank Jero, who's a parent who's active in our diversity committee, for setting this up tonight and bringing this to our school community. So thanks a lot to Jen, who I know is here with us tonight. And I also want to thank, there's a couple of sponsors, Delta Dental and TCF Bank, who make this possible for us to be able to hold this event. So at this point, I would like our guests to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their backgrounds and what brings them to the work that they're here to do with us tonight. So I don't know who wants to go first, Stephen or Nolan, whoever speaks first, I guess.
This time, Steve, thank you. Thanks to Covington School and all your parents. We are really happy to bring the Great Lakes Civility Project to you.
No, I think we're having a hard time with your audio again.
Okay, Steve, I'm going to, Courtney can let me in by my phone. I'm going to switch to the phone while you're in.
Okay, go ahead. He's going to switch to his phone. It goes better.
So Stephen, do you want to introduce yourself while Nolan's
Sure.
Getting his audio again?
Figuring things out. So I'm Stephen Henderson, and I have various media roles that I play around town. I'm the host of Detroit Today on the WDET, the public radio station here. I host a couple of television shows on Detroit Public Television. And I'm the founder and executive editor of Bridge Detroit, which is a Detroit-specific news organization that we launched last year. We always start these civility programs off by talking about sort of how we came up with this idea. Nolan and I have been working together for about 15 years now. And for much of that time, we've also been friends. We met when I came back to Detroit from Washington, where I had been working in the 2000s, and became the editorial page editor at the Detroit Free Press, which is, of course, the liberal newspaper that we have in town. Nolan had been, at that point, the editorial page editor of the Detroit News for about 10 years. I think it was very easy for folks to assume that it would be interesting to kind of stick us together in places and watch us fight. So they did. So we would go on television and we'd go on the radio, or we'd go to debates and panels. And the expectation was that it'd be a good show because we don't agree on very many things, and we're both pretty good at arguing. But pretty quickly, we also, I think, realized that the disagreements we had about politics or culture or any of the things that we were being asked to argue about weren't the only things that kind of brought us together. We started to talk more about other things. We started to ask each other about where we'd been and what we'd done, and we pretty quickly became friends. And I think that was a surprise not just to us, but to lots of people around us. I think both of us had friends who've said over the years, "I can't believe you're friends with that guy. I can't believe you can put up with that guy. I can't believe he doesn't drive you insane." And that was kind of funny back in the late 2000s, in the early 20-teens, but it became less funny over time as the world around us really lost its ability to maintain that kind of relationship, that kind of interaction across political or cultural divides. And so by the time 2016 rolls around and we have this extremely contentious presidential election, and lots of people are left feeling cheated or embittered, and the fundamental breakdown of communication across those political and cultural divides really opens up. Nolan and I really started thinking about the nature of our relationship, the nature of our ability to talk with one another and to not end up coming to blows over our differences. And so we started to think about what the value might be of us being able to talk about that relationship and how it's developed over time, and share with people the things that we do to avoid the kind of fighting and antipathy that you see so much of right now. And so the Civility Project began as a very small idea for us, bringing our friends from different political views together over bourbon, which was one of the things that very early on united us. We both are very enthusiastic fans of bourbon. We would bring people together to sit around and get to know each other and talk about who they were. And it's grown from there to this kind of exercise where we're talking with groups from all over the place about not just the ability to do this, but of course the importance, and that importance just continues to grow. You think about your neighborhood, think about your school or your church or your family. How hard is it right now to have conversations about the things you disagree about? How hard is it to maintain a civil discourse, but also still be passionate, also still stick to your principles? We really have lost an awful lot of that. And so this exercise is designed to try to draw more people back to that kind of interaction. Now you're on mute, Nolan.
Okay, hopefully that's the end of my technical problems. Well, maybe not. Yeah, I apologize for all of those, and hopefully we can roll from here. Thanks, Steve. Earlier this evening, I had my 4-year-old granddaughter at the playground with me, and she saw another little girl there she didn't know, but she immediately ran up to her and said, "Hi, want to be friends?" And the other girl said yes, and they exchanged names, and off they went and played and chattered as if they'd known each other for years. And you can't help but think, wow, why can't it be that easy for the rest of us? Why can't it be that easy in the adult world? And it was easy for them because they found value in that friendship. They wanted to play together, and they didn't set there was no litmus test. There was no prerequisites. And it can be that easy for us if we drop our litmus test, if we drop our prerequisites, and if we find value in being friends with people who aren't necessarily just like us, or at least having relationships or the ability to talk civilly about important matters. And, why is this important? Well, because this is, as Steve said, this has become a very uncivil world. And there's a danger in that. There's a danger in the things that are happening in our society today. This hatred we have for one another based on assumptions about who another person is because of the things they believe or the things they say. And we have a core principle or core belief at the Civility Project that all good people come to their opinions through the same process. They look at the facts, they look at the information, they apply their own experiences, their own come up with opinion. Doesn't make them stupid or evil, doesn't mean they're out to destroy the world, and it doesn't mean there's someone you have to avoid. Rather, it's someone you should try to understand. And that's really the basis of this project. We offer help to people who want to do this because it is important. We can't stay like this because the hatred we're developing for each other will lead eventually to some very bad things. Hatred leads to dehumanization, and dehumanization has been the root of every horrible thing, every atrocity that has happened in this country. And, we think, oh, well, it can never get that bad. Well, it can and it will, and we're headed there if we don't stop and check ourselves and start talking to each other with an honest intent to gain understanding.
We talk at the Civility Project about the really practical ways that we can do that. Before the pandemic started, we were doing these in person with groups around town, and we were asking those groups to go through an exercise before we talked to them that we thought was a really important way of just kind of opening up the idea of all of this. And what we asked them to do was to pair off in groups of two, and to do it in a way that put people who had different perspectives on things, whether they might be political or religious or whatever, put them together, have them meet, and have them talk not about what their differences are or to have an argument about the things they disagree about, but to have a conversation about who they are and why they believe the things that they do. And that's a really important initial step in all of this, is to be able to see somebody as a complete human being, be able to see that the other person who believes something really different than you do came to that belief really through the same process that you did. They just arrived at a different point. They just see it differently than you do. And the reason that we start there is really something that Nolan and I did ourselves about, it's either 4 or 5 years ago, when the NPR project called StoryCorps came to Detroit. The StoryCorps, for those who are unfamiliar, is a national effort to kind of catalog stories about American relationships. People go to the project comes to your town in a little Winnebago, and you go inside for an hour with someone and talk about the relationship that you have. Most people do this with parents or children. They do it with family members. They do it with spouses. But when StoryCorps came to Detroit, I told Nolan that he was the one I wanted to take down there and have a conversation.
And I saw that Winnebago and I thought I was getting s'mores. So off I went.
So we go into Winnebago and I said, here's what I want us to talk about. I want each of us to explain where all of the things that we believe and fight about, where does all that come from? What are the life experiences and things that we've read or thought about that led me to identify as a liberal or a progressive? And what are the things that made Nolan Finley into a conservative? What kinds of things motivate that thinking? So we sat there for an hour and essentially both told our stories. And we've been friends at this point and been working together for about a decade. But there were certainly a lot of things that each of us heard in that conversation that we'd never heard before about the other. And after we were done, there was no question that the two of us had a very different and deeper understanding of the other, and really saw the other person as a much more complete person, more than the sum of their politics or their religious views. And again, we're already pretty far down that road. I mean, we're already friends and found lots of other things that we had in common. But just that conversation, that hour-long conversation, I think opened up doors to a really different kind of understanding of each other. And so that's where we begin this idea of civility. How can you get to know somebody with whom you disagree on things beyond those disagreements? And how do you come to understand where they're coming from and who they are, even if you still passionately and vehemently disagree? How do you get to see them as a fuller human being, which of course I think makes it much easier to think of them as an equal, as an intellectual equal, as somebody whose opinions you can criticize and really dislike, but that you actually respect because you know where it's coming from.
And we know this process works because we've seen it work. It's not only worked for us, but we did this session for the Detroit Regional Chamber early on, and we put together two women who were neighbors, and they walked together every morning for 9 years. They knew that they were from different political places. One was a Democrat, one was a Republican, but they never talked about politics. They intentionally avoided political discussions. So the result of that was they had a lot of assumptions about each other. And when we put them together, they talked for the first time about the why one voted one way and why one voted the other. And, they talked then to the group afterwards, and they said, we found out things we had no clue about, the experiences in their lives that shaped their political views. And, we feel now closer, really, rather than further apart from having discussed the things, that led to their divide, their political divide, at least. Other thing that told me this was an exercise that was worthwhile. Steve and I were up on Mackinac Island for the Republican convention once, and it was late at night. We're at a bar, sitting there having a drink, and I got up, walked away, and these two ladies, two women who I knew, and they were very conservative women up there for the conference. They stopped me and they said, "That's Steve Henderson you're talking to. How can you be friends with him? He's so awful. We just hate him." And I stopped and I said, "How you hate him? How do you know you hate him? Have you met him? Have you ever talked to him?" And they said, "Well, no." And I said, "Well, my seat's open. Go on over there and just introduce yourself. Talk to him for a little while." I said, "I'm sure he'll be open to that." And they did. And it was 2 hours later. I finally got him away from them. And the last thing they said was, "Oh, we just love him. He's so great." Now, nothing about Steve had changed. He was still going to go back and write the same things, but they knew him better. And Steve and I get this all the time. And I'm sure there's a temptation for us to say it about other people, people who read us, hear our views, and say, "Oh, I just hate that person." And, I probably said it myself, "Oh, I just hate that guy." You may hate what we write. You may hate, the positions we take, but you don't know us well enough to hate us. And I think if we keep that in mind, not allow our assumptions to lead to hate, if we just get that much, it's a worthwhile experience. But we should break into groups now. We'd like you to sort of go through this process for about 7-8 minutes. And we just, in these groups, I hope they're fairly small, but in these groups, these breakouts, we would just like you to tell each other, what are the experiences in your life? What are the values you hold that shape your political views, that make you either Republican, Democrat, or independent, that make you conservative or liberal? What are those values and experiences? And listen to each other. And then we come back, maybe we can hear from some of you, and then perhaps we can go through some of the tips we have for beginning and maintaining a civil relationship with someone across the political divide. So if we can get to those groups.
At this point, you should have received an invitation to go to a breakout room. Go ahead and accept that. And you can discuss those questions in there. Mr. Liebson.
Yeah.
I don't know if we both do as co-hosts, but do you have the ability to broadcast a message to the breakout rooms like I do?
Yeah. Yes.
Maybe we want to type in some of those questions.
Yeah. You want me to do that?
Sure.
All right. Whoops.
We've only got one person who hasn't accepted their breakout room invite.
They're in it, and it's underway.
Everyone is in their breakout rooms. Yep. I'm going to pause the recording for a minute. Yep. They have a minute to come back.
Okay. Good.
Do you guys want me to handle calling on people, or you want to do it, or how do you want to?
We can do it.
Okay.
You can have people raise their hands.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everyone should be back at this point.
Okay, so hopefully that was illuminating. I know that you didn't have a terrible amount of time, but we hope that you were able to talk with each other a little about where you get the things that you believe. We want to give some folks a chance to talk about what they talked about in the breakout rooms if they're interested. If you'd like to share what went on in your room, just hit the raise hand button on Zoom, and we'll get you unmuted. Okay. First person is Paul Moreski. I don't know how to unmute people. There you go.
Oh, all good. I think everyone can hear me. Thumbs up.
Yep.
Yes.
Let's
Great.
see you.
How about that? So I won't divulge what necessarily we spoke about, though everybody in our group was very eloquent to point out, various things that happened in their upbringing, or a special moment that resonated so strongly with them that really shapes how they feel politically, and not just politically, but overall on major issues. The thing that I wanted to share was the way everyone spoke was so inviting, right? So calm, very receptive, thanking others for sharing their stories, right? So to me, it was just such a lovely example of, I'm not quite sure exactly which political spectrum everybody fell on, but I was so excited to hear their stories because of the kindness with which they entered into the room, the openness that they had, so that to me, I think, just building on what both you gentlemen said, it's so critical as we try to understand each other with all the things that are going on in the world today. So that was my quick story I wanted to share.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, that's great. Anyone else? No? I don't see any other raised hands.
Well,
You might have to do the teacher thing and just call on people.
why don't you call on somebody, Joseph? We'd like to hear from
Oh,
you.
I see a hand up. Laura Cook is raised.
Laura Cook.
I hope y'all can hear me. I have my video off, but we thought it was really interesting to discuss how Facebook and social media has changed our interactions with people that we know, as well as people that we don't know so well, but we might know, for example, their views on intimate subjects like abortion, but we don't know the names of their children. So I think social media has really changed the way that we interact with people about politics, because some people share significant political views and some people keep it private. And it's like, maybe more than you want to know about people because of social media. And then you don't really get to know the actual person themselves.
That's such a good point. It's something we're always asked about at every session. Social media is not a forum. They're not platforms for civil discussions. The kind of thing we're talking about is only effective face-to-face or by telephone, but not on a social media platform. They are instruments at this point of incivility rather than civility. And if you're serious about trying to get to know someone and build a relationship with someone, surely don't do it on a public social media platform, because it doesn't work.
Yeah, this is actually an area where Nolan and I don't exactly agree. We do agree. We do agree that social media right now is a pretty negative space for this kind of discourse, and the culture that's grown up around social media is the problem, as I see it. I actually don't think, as tools, they are creating that negative space. It's the way we're interacting with those tools. that creates the negative space. I mean, if you think about it, the very idea of social media should actually make what we're talking about much easier. It is a way to be able to connect with people that you can't connect with in the physical world, people maybe you've lost touch with, people who live in far-flung places, and you can instantaneously be interacting with them. That should be a place where we find lots of this kind of civil discourse. But I think the culture right now is so broken, especially in our country, around politics and other issues, that we've weaponized these platforms in a way that does make them negative spaces, and they're growing their own cultures that reinforce that idea. You know, the selectivity that they offer is a dangerous tool. The idea that you can create a community on social media that is only people you like and agree with, and you can shut everybody else out. The ability to kind of publicly ostracize people for their ideas, right? This whole idea of defriending or blocking or muting, which of course you can't just do on social media. You got to announce that you did it, right? I'm blocking that person. I'm never speaking to that person again, or I muted this person and here's why. And then you get cheers from the rest of your social media community. These are signs of rot in our own discourse that are playing out in social media. And I think eventually social media may end up being the path toward a really different kind of civil discourse that we're not even thinking about or capable of taking advantage of right now, that as they develop and as it becomes easier and easier to create community online, we will create healthier communities in the long run. I mean, it's a question of how technology gets used early in its existence. I mean, every communication technology that's been invented was used initially in some really bad ways, and they all grow up and mature, and then they become really vital parts of our interaction. I still have hope, I guess, for social media. I don't think Nolan has any hope for it.
No, I think it's the devil's workshop. But anyway, so what happens next after this exercise you went through? And obviously, when you're doing it one-on-one with someone you've decided it would be worthwhile to build a friendship or a relationship with, what happens next? I mean, you're going to go deeper. You're going to ask a lot of questions of each other. But once you get to that point where you feel you understand and you respect the other person, how do you move into those difficult political conversations? And, we have some advice for that, as you might imagine, some tips. And one is to, the first is to set an intentional goal for the conversation. And that goal should be to learn something, to hear the other person out in hopes that you might hear something you hadn't thought of before, or you might hear something that helps you hone your own opinion, sharpen your own viewpoints. And to get to that point, I mean, you got to check your self-righteousness at the door. Don't go in there with this superior attitude and the idea that you're going to convince that person and win an argument. If you're out to win an argument, don't bother, because it's not going to happen. If you're out to destroy the other person, it's not worth doing. Have an intentional, honest goal for the conversation. As I said, check your smugness. Remember that the person across the table from you may find your views as aberrant as you find theirs. I mean, everybody thinks they're the only ones who talk to God. So set that honest goal of learning from each other. And Steve and I started that a long time ago. It just sort of came naturally. I mean, I respected him, and I knew I wouldn't agree with what he said, but I wanted to hear his opinion. I wanted to learn something, and I wanted to sort of challenge my own views. I mean, I think it's important for us to constantly to challenge our own assumptions, our own views, our own convictions. But you've got to do it with that honest goal of learning. If you're trying to convince, if you're trying to convert, believe me, 14 years of talking to Steve, I can tell you firsthand, you're not going to convert the other person. You're not going to convince them of the error of their ways. And that shouldn't, and there's not much fun in that for either party. But if you can learn to have a vigorous, even a passionate discussion while maintaining that level of respect and that measure of civility, I think you'll get a lot out of it. But Steve, it requires good listening.
Yeah, and listening is of course maybe a very obvious principle that would go along with civility, but I think when we are talking about listening in the context of this project, we're talking about something maybe a little different than many of us think. I think for a lot of us, and I would include myself in this from time to time as well, we think we're listening if we're not talking. In other words, if I'm allowing somebody else, if I'm letting Nolan have the floor, that means I'm listening. But am I really listening all the time? Sometimes I'm in my own head. I'm thinking about what I just said to him and whether he's registered at all the points that I was making. Maybe I'm thinking about what I'm going to say as soon as he stops talking, right? When it's next my turn, what am I going to say in response to what he's saying? Or sometimes maybe I'm just sitting and kind of judging what he's saying and not really investing in the ideas that he's trying to get across. And it really does require some investment. You have to have some faith that what the other person is saying is coming from a place of strong belief and respect, and that it has value, that it has value because it's something they believe. And so we talk about an active form of listening, I think, that is a little different than the way most of us kind of go through our lives every day. And I have some kind of key tests that I give myself when I'm involved in these kind of discussions that tell me whether I'm actually listening or not. The first is, when the other person's done talking, could I repeat back what they said? Not word for word necessarily, but in good faith, represent the point of view and the arguments and the belief that person has been trying to express. Could I essentially, stand in their shoes in some way and express what they're saying in an accurate way? And then the other thing I kind of always ask myself is whether I have questions when that other person is done talking. Do I want to know more about what they're saying? Do I want to know more about why they believe what they're saying? And when I don't have questions for somebody, I think it's kind of a telltale sign I'm not really that invested in what they're saying. And maybe I'm not really listening all that closely. But when I do, I think, again, it opens up the possibility for a different kind of exchange than the yelling and the insults that I think we see much more commonly.
And when you sit down to talk, check yourself throughout the conversation. Are you allowing your anger to shut off your brain? Are you allowing your righteousness or sense of righteousness to excuse uncivil behavior and hateful remarks? Are you lecturing rather than learning? Ask yourself those questions throughout the interaction. And if you develop these habits, it can become very, very rewarding to try to build these sort of cross the divide friendships and this ability to have civil conversations with people you disagree with is a lost art. It's a lost art at every level of our society, but particularly in our political world. And so it's a block to consistent consensus building. And we used to value that give and take that led to a middle ground. We don't get to the middle ground much anymore today. It's all or nothing. One side has to win when they have the opportunity, and the other side, has to win the whole thing when they have the opportunity. There's not much compromise, cooperation, consensus building going on. And, we can get there. We can get there in our schools, in our PTAs, in our workplaces, if we have this commitment to civil, honest conversations. And, this may be a good place to stop and allow some time for some questions. What do you all think?
Yeah, I think that would be great. I actually have a question for both of you that's interesting.
Uh-huh.
I was always taught by my dad, who's kind of a historian, that you should read things that you don't necessarily agree with in order to sort of understand your own argument or what you think about things and understand why somebody else might think a different way. And I'm just wondering, we live in a time where there's a lot of, I hear a lot of people who don't trust media, and they say, you can't trust anything you read. So how do you address that? Because you're both journalists by trade. How do you address this time we're living in, where it seems like people don't know where to get information from, accurate? If you try to share information with someone to sort of support your argument, it seems kind of like they just can say that's not true out of hand without really any sort of consideration. How do you address that environment we're living in right now?
Well, we do live in a news environment in which too many of our media outlets pander to their audience, and that people tend to choose the news outlets that present the point of view they agree with. There's not a whole lot of middle road objective media sources out there. And so I think you have to do exactly what your dad told you to do. Make sure you're consuming news from a lot of different places. Get all your food groups in there, so you have a good understanding of all the various points of views, and then make your own decision. Don't let somebody else decide your opinion for you. Make sure you're thinking for yourself and applying your own, values and tests to the viewpoints that are being offered.
Yeah, and I think the question about the validity of news sources right now is really critical, because you have so many news sources. You have many, many more that are available to people than were just 5 or 10 years ago, because of the internet, which is on one hand a really great thing, right? It's a democratization of news and information that is important, but it also comes with the caveat that well, anybody can consider themselves a news source, right. And you don't have any idea what standards they're using, what practices that they're using, or how they're even deciding to do the things that they're doing. And I think that those are important and fair questions to ask of any news source. If you ask the Detroit News, for instance, its standards and ethics look like, they will give you a whole passel of things that guide their reporters and columnists' work, and the editors. They can tell you how they make decisions and why. And then here's a really important thing. When they get stuff wrong, they say it was wrong and they correct it. There's no such thing as a news source that never makes mistakes. We all do. The question really is about who owns their mistakes and how transparent they are about why the mistake was made and why they won't do it in the future. I think that's a really critical test for any news source. But I also would say you can find lots of very small, even one-person news outfits nowadays that are doing it the right way, that really do have practices and standards that really are transparent about how they do it, and transparent about mistakes that they can make. You just have to be careful, because there are people out there not doing that, and you've got to be able, I think, to distinguish between those things. And again, I think your dad was right that you want to go out and seek things that that don't reflect your point of view, things that you know are going to strike you as wrong or misguided or just different, because that makes your convictions in the things that you believe in, I think, stronger. Nolan and I think, have always paid pretty close attention to each other's work, and when we were both in the same role at different papers with different points of view, I know that one of the biggest influences on our work was the other one. Not that we were being convinced by that work, but that we were using that work as kind of the foil to our own points of view, and that we trusted that the other person was coming up with things in exactly the same way we were. They're just coming out on a different end of it. But that there was value in knowing what that was. And I think that's probably still true. You've got to be able to do that, and you've got to be able to do it without, dismissing the other point of view, just saying, look, I disagree with it, but I see where they're coming from.
And, you also have to be aware that there's no real hierarchy of credibility on the internet. You can Google any subject and you may find the first item may be from the New York Times, and the second might be from Bob the blogger in his mother's basement. You've got to be able, as a news consumer, to discern the difference between those two outfits. It used to be easy to get in the media. Not so long ago, there was a high threshold of you had to get a printing plant or satellites and a license. It wasn't easy to be, in the media. And then staying in the media required that you did meet certain standards. And now there are no universal standards and the technology has gotten to the point where it's very easy to deceive. And you can't even believe that everything you're seeing with your own eyes is actually what happened, is actually true. And it's going to get worse as technology evolves, and we haven't figured it out yet.
Thanks. Does anyone else, I know we're running low on time, is there any other, maybe a final question from anyone? I see Karen Holiday is raising her hand.
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you. This has been such an interesting discussion. So my question is, can either one of you talk about a time when you were engaged in a conversation where someone was not being civil, and what did you do to handle that? Thank you.
Between the two of us, it's happened all the time. We are not Jesus and Gandhi here. We get after it, as you can imagine, and the temptation to take a jab, to take a cheap shot is always there. And, when we get to the point where we're so steamed, we have sort of this internal governor, if you will, that says, stop and come back another time, because we can walk away from the conversation, but we'll never walk away from the friendship. And so we understand that. And there does come points where we just say, maybe it's time to put this off for another day and think about it a little longer.
Yeah, I mean, on the television show that we both appear on public television, it used to just be the two of us. And for a half hour, we would just go at it. And after about 4 or 5 years, the producers and the other folks at the station decided they needed to have somebody else there to like just manage the whole thing and stop us from just, you know, getting after each other the whole time. And that's when Christy McDonald joined us on that show. And, you know, if she were here, I think she would talk for hours about the frustration of that job. There are times when I think she just wanted to grab us both by the neck and shake us. But Nolan's right. You know, as passionate or even angry as those discussions can get, and they do. I mean, there's some stuff that we bitterly disagree about, and if you get us going, you know, we really do get after each other. But there is that commitment, I think, to the idea that you're never getting up from the table for good. You're never getting up and saying, I'm done with this guy. I am not talking to him anymore. Neither one of us ever goes to that point. And the reason is that there is more to the relationship than whatever it is that we're disagreeing about. I mean, we can be mad about something, but in both of our minds, I think is still the value of being able to have that conversation with each other.
That's right. Another question or two, we can stick around. If not, we just leave you with a couple of final thoughts. I'll start. I really do think we have to look at our own lives and how we are dealing with other people, particularly the ones we disagree with, and commit to learning about someone else, getting to know the other person, but before we decide we don't like them or that we hate them, give yourself a chance to have a civil relationship with someone you disagree with before you dismiss the possibility out of hand.
Yeah, and we also talk about the place to start this. I mean, I think it can be really frustrating right now to watch like the national conversations that are melting down, the inability to resolve issues or problems without really crazy arguments or even violence. I mean, I think everybody in the country, all good people in the country, watched what happened on January 6th in Washington and just thought, oh my God, what are we supposed to be doing? Like, how did we lose that many people to that kind of mob think and activity? And it can feel defeating because I can't tell you, frankly, how you reach people once they've reached that point. But I think what we're talking about is something closer to home. We talk about thinking about the places where you have agency, where you have some power and maybe some control, the communities that you live in and where you interact with people all the time. That's your opportunity to turn things in a different way. Find somebody in your school, in your church, in your neighborhood. Find somebody in your family. Increasingly, I think all of us are facing that, the realization that we're related to people who really think differently about the world than we do. Find those people and start this process, right? That's where you have the opportunity to make things go in a different direction. And I think it is less defeating, right? It is less frustrating to operate in those spaces than it is to sit and watch social media or cable news and just watch the world kind of melting down around you.
Yeah.
So thank you all.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, thank you all. We appreciate it, the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both for joining us. And I think, kind of piggybacking on Stephen's last point, there's been a lot of concern among people like me who are teachers in recent time because of, there's a lot in the news right now. There's a lot of people fired up about, the things that we're doing in our classrooms and things like that. So, one of the ways that we would encourage anyone here tonight or anyone in our community who has those kinds of thoughts or concerns is be a part of our diversity committee, which is how this event happened tonight. We meet every Tuesday and in the morning, and it's always in Dr. Hakim's weekly email, the Zoom link to that. And we're real people that you can talk to and find out what we actually think and what our motivations are behind what we do around diversity, equity, inclusion work in our schools, and how our motivations are really just to make our school community a great place for all of the students who are here in all of the diverse ways in which they come to us. So, I think it's really important, and we have a great opportunity as a school community. Many of us, I live in this community also, so we're members of the same community here, and we have an opportunity to model these kinds of disagreements in a civil way with our students and our children, and to come together and come to some kind of understanding about what it is that we're doing, because these are all of our schools. They're public schools, so we can really put the public in that phrase and all get together and make a good situation for everyone. So thank you for joining us, and thank everyone for giving us your time this evening. And we will, I'm sure Dr. Hakim will be sharing the recording of this event, so you can share it with anyone in your networks who you would like to. And please reach out to us if you're interested in the work that we do, and join us to be part of those conversations within our school and our district. So any final words or anything else you'd like to spit?
Just thank you for having us next time in person.
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
All right. All right. I think we're good.